It's time to get out of Dodge, or maybe get into Dodge. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Stephen Green and Bill Whittle, and this episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, the Interior Department and its Bureau of Land Management have been in a 2-year process of planning to move many of the people who work in the BLM out west, where the majority of the lands are that are managed by the Bureau of Land Management on behalf of the federal government. This is part of an overall Trump administration effort, not only to downsize some of the federal agencies, but also to move the officers of those agencies and the bureaucrats in those agencies closer to the people and to the work that they do. Now, of course, this is a problem for a couple of reasons. And Stephen Green, I'd like to engage with you first on this, because the number one problem for you is going to be these people are moving to Colorado.
Oh, man. I joked during the backstage segment, haven't we had enough? The Californians came out here and they turned the state purple, and now it's practically blue, at least, at the statewide level. And now you want to send a few thousand people in from Washington and Arlington, Virginia? What did we do? What did we do to deserve this?
You managed your state well.
Right. Well, those days are over. Just watch John Hickenlooper try and run for president.
But does it seem crazy? I mean, because at one point the complaint was that if you move the people who work in these agencies out of Washington, D.C., for example, one complaint was it makes it tougher for Congress to perform oversight because the people they need to talk to are further away.
Okay, we make 5 of these shows a week, the 3 of us. You guys do even more. I'm in Colorado. Bill's in Los Angeles. Scott, you're in Texas. He used to be in Pennsylvania. And the 3 of us do this 5 segments a week through Skype. I mean, this is like the easiest thing in the world. This is the 21st century.
It's shockingly how little time the 3 of us have spent in the same place at the same time. It's got to be less than 2 hours. I would say 2 or 3.
Yeah, just hours.
And thousands of people participate in these meetings.
Absolutely. It's this is a no-brainer. This is not the 19th century when people had to hop on a horse and drive down to or drive up Capitol Hill to do this stuff. Now, that's just a lame excuse. But let's think less about moving the people out, because let's face it, if you're if you're used to the Washington life, you're probably not going to want to give that up, because you didn't go into government because you wanted to do something great for the country. The perks were great. You like the monuments and all the rest. You move the jobs to Colorado, and you see who here out west wouldn't mind working for the federal government for a few years to help make things better here out west, instead of some money-sucking East Coaster trying to figure out how to make life better in Washington, D.C.
Well, Bill Whittle, Steve brings up something important, because one of the criticisms of this move by the Trump administration to essentially decentralize the federal government, and specifically in this case, is that it just looks like a cloaked effort to get rid of some people in the federal government, because a lot of people don't want to leave the greater Washington, D.C. metro area. And so those people will resist that, and to which the government will say, well, that's fine. You can stay here. We're moving your job there. But I found this interesting. This was all the way at the bottom of this Washington Post article. And Bill, I just want to get your reaction to this. This is another one of the problems with moving these people. Under federal law, the Bureau of Land Management will have to pay all relocation and real estate costs for employees who choose to move west, including what it takes to sell their homes in the Washington region and to purchase a new one. Employees and their families will be entitled to 4 months of hotel stays on the government's dime. Federal personnel experts said, which would cost as much as $100,000 per employee. The agency will probably offer retirement and buyout packages to employees who decide not to move, which could equal as much as a year's salary depending on their age and years of service. Bill, isn't that the most compelling argument you've ever heard for us not to decentralize the federal government? The cost.
Was this from a reporter?
This was from the Washington Post. Yes.
Okay, so what the Washington Post is saying, that if I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I sell my house and decide to move to Montana, I'm going to need more money to buy a house in Montana than I had when I sold my house in Arlington.
Well, you'll need more money if you buy like 1,000 acres in Montana.
No, you won't.
Nuh-uh.
Maybe not.
No, seriously, no,
Yeah.
you won't. You will not. That's what. See, this is reporting today, right? And this is what one of my subjects on Right Angle this week is the ability to think critically and just sit down and look at what are they actually saying. Well, we have to pay money to relocate these people from the most expensive neighborhood in America, and that's the end of the sentence because you will not have to pay a dime if you're moving people out of Washington D.C. They're all going to get rich, and they're going to live like kings. This is a wonderful idea for a number of reasons. First of all, if you really are interested in land management, why don't you go out and manage some land? Because if you're not, it gives one the unsavory impression that you're really just a bureaucratic pencil pusher who's in this for the pension, doesn't know a thing about what you're talking about, and more importantly, doesn't care. The idea of getting as much of the federal government dispersed out into the people is a very, very important and very good idea. We talk about inside the Beltway, Scott, and we talk about echo chambers, but this is precisely what happens. You've got the guys who are responsible for the Bureau of Land Management in Montana, let's say, meeting for dinner 2 times a week at Ruth's Chris in Washington and talking about what a jerk Donald Trump is, when they are not in any way representing the interests of the people for the agency that presumably they're working for. It shouldn't even be there anyway. So if you want to be in the Bureau of Land Management, go where the land is, and this applies to everything else. This is a really sound idea because, like so many of the other things that Donald Trump seems to come up with, it takes the argument and reduces it to very simple terms. What's the problem? You've got a job in the Bureau of Land Management. We're not talking about taking your job away. We're just saying, why don't you go where the land is? And then that puts them in a position where they have to respond with the truth, which is, but I don't want to leave Washington and be out among all those smelly people with horses and dust and everything. I want to be land management guy here in Washington, D.C. at my cocktail parties in inexpensive hotels. Don't you understand? That's what land management is. And so I think it's a marvelous idea, and I say expand it to everybody.
Hey, can I throw something in real quick?
Please.
I can't remember where I saw this. It was just in the last few weeks, but somebody, maybe it was in a book I read, I can't remember. But the point was that before the New Deal, the average person, the average American who didn't live in Washington or serve in the military, their only contact with the federal government in their entire lives was a trip to the post office.
Mm-hmm.
And that is exactly how the framers of the Constitution envisioned it, which is why they thought that there would be so little threat. The so-called Federalists who were pushing ratification of the Constitution thought there would be, they were telling the Anti-Federalists, you don't have to worry about an all-powerful central, but they exist. You'll very rarely come into contact with these people. They'll all be concentrated in a little district 10 miles square in a swamp, essentially. And occasionally, if you're importing or exporting goods, you may come into contact with them. But other than that, really not. I like the idea that Bill suggests there of the, when the headquarters people at BLM go out for lunch, it's at the Golden Corral, and some of the great ideas are being discussed around the vanilla pudding bog at the Golden Corral. I just think
Love it.
That's fantastic. I like the idea that of federal officials being closer to the people. I remember when I was elected as a county commissioner, and I was at the local grocery store, and I saw this woman in one of what Dick Nixon would call a cloth coat, a woman in a cloth coat wrestling with whether to buy the chicken that was like 69 cents a pound or the chicken that was 79 cents a pound, and just trying to, she was an older person, and I'm her representative, and I help to decide how much money the government is going to spend that comes out of her pocket. That was a very powerful and valuable experience for me, and I want more government officials to experience that. The other thing, which doesn't get talked about as much, when they talk about the possible expense of moving these people, and some won't move, so the expense of not moving these people, essentially buying them out, is the idea that the 7 richest zip codes in America are the zip codes concentrated right around Washington, D.C. And all of that money
Sick.
comes from all over the country and gets spent on Wagyu beef at fancy restaurants in near Washington, D.C. I love the idea that if we're going to have to spend this federal money, then let's spend it in Rifle, Colorado. Let's spend it in some small town somewhere. Let's break up these headquarters. The technology exists with this, video conferencing like this. And frankly, the further you get away from the hub of lobbyists, the better off this country is going to be. There are so many strong arguments for doing this. I'm willing to absorb the short-term cost. Who negotiated this deal, by the way? Who negotiated the deal where you get 4 months in a hotel, while you try, and we have to pay for the process of selling your house and moving your stuff? I've never had a job that I got that kind of a sweetheart deal. And this is what makes people who hear the song from government employees that, I went to public service. I know it doesn't pay as well, but I'm willing to serve, for the good of the country. You go, wait a minute. 4 months in a hotel and all relocation expenses and, all these other kinds of things. We don't get that. This is beautiful. And let me just, be at the front of the line to praise the Trump administration, the Interior Secretary, the Bureau of Land Management, and all the other federal agencies, by the way, who are engaged in similar exercises right now to not only downsize, but to decentralize the federal government. The more, the better. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.